Why, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Voice of the Rings. I am your host and guide, Zollin Ironshield, as always. And guys, I just watched episode 4 of Rings of Power, and I must say, you guys, I am very excited with this one. All right, if the series keeps going down a way of enjoyable episodes like this, a standalone, let's say just standalone show, I will be very excited. It was very well done. This episode was, in my opinion, far better in storytelling than episode 3 was. Episode 3 had beautiful views, had a couple little nuggets here and there, but it was really discombobulated. It felt feeling like episode 3, but episode 4, and remember I told you in the episode that episode 3 felt like you really could have just watched it for the scenery, right? Just seeing Numenor, because that was gorgeous in episode 3. But it didn't feel like there was a beginning, middle, and end, which makes every episode good. You really have to have that in every episode. I know that's a series, but you really have to have that. This episode 4, you guys, had that, okay? It felt really good. It had good storytelling, good character building. At the end, so we still see a little bit of teenager Galadriel that bothers me just slightly, but she starts having a change middle of this episode, all right, where she starts acting like the Galadriel I know. All right, from the storytelling. So that's exciting to me. And all the other characters' growth are fantastic. The Regent Queen, right, who's the stand-in, she was really good in this episode. Alfarason is perfect. Oh my gosh, he's very good at talking and very the perfect politician. So far, there's a lot. And at the very beginning, the best parts. Let's get straight into it. Again, I will give points if you don't know. I've done a couple reviews in these other ones. Again, feel free to put your views in the views down there. Guys, please, if you dislike something or like something, give me a description of why. Don't just put, I dislike the whole thing, or I love the whole thing. Like, granted, that's fine. If you want to put that, but I really want to hear what are the things, what are the reasons for your thinking behind the subject, right? That's the point here. We're breaking it down for fun, right? We're not going to like everything. We're not going to love everything, right? And we're not going to hate everything, right? We have complex minds, right? As we should all realize. We can have, I like this, I didn't like this, I like this, I didn't like this, right? And then at the end, you can judge, well, overall didn't like it, or overall liked it. Mid-ground, great, terrible, right? That's what we can do. That's how you judge things, right, people? All right, so again, let's get straight into it. I've got a little thing over there. I've got lore correct, which would be things that I really enjoyed that I thought fit the lore well or was following the lore perfect. I enjoyed just parts I liked. I disliked things I didn't like, and then horrible lore changes that I'm just like, why'd they do that, right? Again, not a whole lot of the horrible lore changes in this episode. There's one or two, but I will point them out. But let's go ahead and get through this. Again, I can't have sound, so you're going to hear the beautiful background music of The Lord of the Rings Online, which is great music, right? And then also we're going to just look through stills here. And I will leave the words on there at the bottom so we can kind of see what's happening. They gave us a replay of episode 3, which again had some good information, but kind of just leaves us hanging. We've now found out that the term Adar actually is the terminology for father, which they point out in this episode. All right, so it's not them saying another name for Sauron, but they don't quite tell us in this episode, but I'm pretty sure we'll get there. Okay, so let's hop through here. And guys, as you can tell, this episode left me happy after watching it. Episode 3, I was confused and with a couple things, which is weird since I know so much of the lore. And I was like, well, some things were enjoyable, but other things were kind of like, in episode 3, right? Episode 4 left me like, that was good. I enjoyed that. Let's just say standalone show by itself, fantasy show, right? Great. As in Lord of the Rings, this episode 4 felt a lot more like what I would think of Middle Earth than the previous episodes, okay? The previous ones had clips here and there that were like, oh, that felt like Middle Earth. That felt like Middle Earth. By the way, the music was better in this one too. There were some good parts of music that I actually really enjoyed. So let's just get through it. I'll tell you the things. Again, you can tell I'm a lot more excited. This episode 4 makes me happy. If the season goes in the direction of this episode more with this kind of style, I'll be happy. So first off, we get a fantastic shot of the capital, palace of Numenor, right? With the background, look at the background back there, you guys. Oh, so cool. Now she's doing some, queenly duty where she's like talking to these, court maidens probably with their children, right? Like, okay, that's fine. They lead us into a storytelling here, right? So we start with the kind of like showing daily life, and then she gets this, something happens and she feels an earthquake happen, right? And she's like, oh, that's normal. There's just always occasionally an earthquake, right? She makes a funny comment to make everyone okay. And then this just, oh, you guys, it's so good. And I'm going to have to switch the song because it doesn't fit the feeling of what happens here. Basically what happens is she starts there like, oh, there's an earthquake, okay? And then she goes, and then the white tree of Numenor starts blowing its leaves, okay? And then, okay, this is where it gets pretty cool, right? So she looks out, and then she starts walking out, and basically what happens is, epic, by the way, CGI, fantastic. This whole part is just amazing to watch, especially on our big TV. It was amazing. I got goosebumps. Like, I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, they're just going for it. Look at the waves coming over. It's just destroying the island, right? And the wave comes to the door and hits her, and everything explodes, and the wave goes in, and the animation's crazy. Look at the wave just swallowing Numenor, and then boom. And I'm like, this can't be already happening in the story, right? And then boom, she wakes up. It's like a nightmare or a vision, right? And I'm like, okay, so that's interesting. How did she have that vision, for one? But again, as in the animation for this part, it is a lore-like for just showing the animation of how Numenor just gets destroyed in the future, okay? Again, it's kind of a foretelling. And I enjoyed this part greatly. So I enjoy there, right? Lore correct. And then she wakes up after she gets hit by the water screaming, and she's like, oh, she like wakes up, right? The Queen Regent. Again, this is Tamiriel, or gosh, her name. I'm not even going to go there right now. And by the way, in episode 3, my review, I was saying, I was saying his name wrong. I apologize for that in last review episode. If you noticed that, I do apologize. But I realized after I watched it, I was like, someone pointed it out. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't. I was saying some other name of a different character because I was reading history before that. But anyway, now, so she wakes up, and then we get to like, oh wow, that was crazy. Now we get to this guy again. He's stirring up trouble. He's like, elves, like, we don't want elves taking our jobs. They're immortal, like that kind of thing. Little bit of stuff from a life in there, just a tiny bit. But again, so I'm gonna do a little dislike, but at the same time, I'm gonna do a like, because this part turns into a very excellent showing of Ar-Pharazôn. Okay, so Ar-Pharazôn, basically, this is Ar-Pharazôn's son, apparently, behind him. And he comes, there's an issue in the market. And Ar-Pharazôn's like, okay. He's kind of like, he's in charge of keeping the peace, kind of. He's like the assistant, right now at this time. So he's like, okay, let's go see, basically. And he's telling his son, you have to do the little things too, right? So that's why he's going around the town, giving people handshakes, right? It's really well done. The whole part is really well done. So again, another like. This whole part was, I was brought into the feeling of Numenor this entire time, okay? And then he's like, okay, there's issues. So he goes out there, and basically he's talking smack and stuff. And then basically Ar-Pharazôn, very, very diplomatically and very well-spoken, changes the whole crowd's feeling and says, I will not allow this to happen, that the elves will, take your jobs and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And with my hands, basically, he says, it's very well done, where he's not really, like, saying anything bad. But again, lore correct for him, because his character in the books is so good at being deceptive, right? So, like, this whole part is really well done. I was just... You guys, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, I wasn't sure about how I'd like this part. Again, I do find it kind of interesting. One thing that got me a little bit out of the thing was the fact that everyone in Numenor looks like they're from every part of the planet, right? And again, I don't care, because they all have good, cool dress, and maybe they do have people visiting from other realms and stuff, because they are, a human, massive city kind of thing. So I can understand that to an extent. So a little bit of a dislike there. But again, they all acted really well. Like, everybody in the crowd felt like the right tone and feeling what they were doing and acting. So everyone here, all the actors, like, thumbs up to them, because this whole part really, I was really engrossed, really. I was really like, oh wow, this is intense, right? Like, this is a great conversation. This is really leading into that. Even this guy turns into liking what Ar-Pharazôn says, right? Even though he was causing the instigation of basically civil unrest, right? And then basically he has his speech, right? And then he goes up on the thing and he goes, and again, the area looks like Numenor. It just looks fantastic. So again, another like there, just for the fact that this whole scene looks fantastic, all right? And again, he's doing his like speech, right? It's really, really well done, right? I swear that elven hands will never take Numenor's helm, right? Like basically, again, there's that thing where Numenor and elves haven't seen each other in a long time, and that is a lore thing, right? At this point, in the story, but you'll see what they do. It's really well done. So again, there's some changes here and there in lore, but it's still following the overall arching story. Basically, it says drinks on me, you know, and everyone gets some nice drinks, and then we get a nice little conversation between and Elendil, right? This is his daughter. Again, I was saying that name wrong last time, so forgive me for that from last review. I was reading a bunch of history of names, and I just got stuck. And if you noticed my last review, I kind of like hesitated for a second. I was like, wait a second, I think I'm saying that name wrong. I kind of kept just going because I was in a talking thing. But so his daughter, right? I forget her name right now, but again, so Elendil's daughter, and then this is Ar-Pharazôn's son. So they have a little conversation, right? And he is actually, his character's sort of grown on me. He's kind of like, you know, both of their characters are actually really well done. I'm gonna do a like, because this whole part, like, they were really like, I like how this all plays out with their character. They're obviously, you know, he likes her, obviously. They're doing a little thing like that, but it was really well done. I enjoyed it. I thought it was made sense how they would talk, right? So then we get to a part that probably the only part in the entire show that I did not enjoy. I mean, excuse me, not show. This episode is this part. Basically, Galadriel tries to force the queen to the Muriel, right? The queen. So again, with her character, I like her character now from this episode. But basically, Galadriel kind of tries to force her to join him. And I really, again, one more time, I'm sorry. It's a dislike, okay? It's not going to be a lore dislike because I've already given that for other episodes, but she basically tries to really push it again. And again, she's not a young elf. She's thousands of years old already at this point. She should already know how to conduct herself with royalty. But that aside, she basically, the queen, Muriel, gets mad, right? And then, because she says something about she wants to see her father, the true king, who is in the tower that no one's seen for a long time. And I'll get back to that in a minute, why I think that part is cool. But, his people she tries to convince to go help Halbrand, the new character, the Southernland people, to help them, right? Basically against Sauron that she now knows is coming back, right? And basically, she doesn't want to at this point. She's like, no, I can't do that. And basically, Galadriel just takes it one step too far. And I do like the fact that Elendil basically says, that's enough for something. He basically interjects, like, come, like, respect the queen region, right? Muriel. Like, I like that. That was a good part, so that's a like in that conversation. But basically, she gets thrown in the dungeon. It's just like, she's really bad. So she hit a touchy point, right? And again, this is the Galadriel. It just doesn't make sense to me where she's like extreme, right? Extreme. But again, that's the only part of this entire episode that I still was like, ugh, right? The one part that was really like kind of rough. But anyway, she gets thrown in the dungeon. She's with Halbrand. Remember in episode 3, he got thrown in the dungeon because he fought those guys who kind of attacked him or egged him on. And basically they have a little conversation, but we go here to Isildur, who basically hears a voice again. I'm not sure whose voice he's hearing, but some woman's voice is whispering Isildur. And I don't know if it's supposed to be Galadriel. I don't think so, but I'm assuming it's probably like the sea, right? Or like maybe a sea spirit or something. I don't know. Maybe they're going to try to do like Goldberry, like the river spirit, right? Maybe. I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea what that, because they're doing the whole, the sea is always right, which, okay, that part in episode 3 is a little rough. That made me chuckle. But again, beautiful shot of Numenor again. And basically he lets go of the rope. The Sea Master goes, yeah, why did you let go of that rope? So this whole part I disliked, because I know that he doesn't want to be put into the Sea Guard or whatever, but basically his friends catch it and he blames all of them and kicks them all out of the program because he knows Isildur did it on purpose. But why the heck did he kick his 2 friends out? that part I disliked. So anyway, dislike for that. It has nothing to do with lore, but just I didn't like it because it didn't make sense. A real leader, why would you punish the other people around that person who had no responsibility for the guy who just did the mistake and in fact saved his mistake and grabbed the rope? So one thing I disliked about that part. But when we keep moving on from that, there's a lot of good stuff coming up though, guys. Just be ready. All right, so anyway, he talks to his friends. It's actually a good conversation. His one friend's mad. His other friend keeps them from fighting. They have a little bit of a scuffle, but their one other friend splits them up, and Isildur walks away. It's fine, the whole situation. Then we get back to our friend here, right? The elf, who's been captured. Basically what happens is they're saying the father, right? Agorn again, or whatever, excuse me, the word is. And this person walks up, right? And then we see this face. Right, which we saw blurred in the last episode. Again, it's still blurred there. We see this face. Now, I'm pretty sure, unless this is some elf that's following Sauron, I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be Sauron. And I can see very well his scarred and horrible face, how later he can use his magic. You know how they did it in The Hobbit, how Thranduil's face, he shows his face to Thorin, and then goes back because Thranduil's using magic to cover up the actual scars he has from a dragon, to heal it, basically, but he's able to, like, show it. I think that's kind of a similar thing here. Remember, he's a Maiar, right? He's not an elf. He's not a human. But later he takes a fair form of an elf. And I can see how this character, if you really did the makeup different and his elf ears, you could really make him look very majestic and, like, very fair, right? So, again, much better than that other person that we all thought was Sauron, right? Whatever that character is with the bald, which we still haven't seen in episode 4, by the way, throwing that out there. So I think she's probably some corruption or something. But anyway... So he's actually pretty cool if it is. He basically goes down to this orc, and it's weird because he kind of like gives it a rest in peace kind of thing, which is I don't know if I like that or not, because maybe Sauron sort of likes the creations of the orcs. I don't know, but I'm gonna be honest, I kind of dislike that part, just a little bit dislike. Now how this character looks, if it is Sauron, okay, I do enjoy the fact how he looks right now, that he hasn't put on a fair form yet, right? He's kind of just has a yucky form for the orcs and they respect him, right? Kind of thing. He basically stabs the orc that was dying and kills him, but kind of like in a respectful way, put him out of his misery kind of stab. So, I don't know. Interesting. Maybe he respects the orcs more than every other living thing. I don't know, because they are his weird, twisted creation. They do call him father, right? So, who knows, right? Of course, Morgoth is technically the one that created the orcs, but I'm sure Sauron helped in things. But again, very interesting looking character. He basically comes up to the elf, to our main character here, and he kind of starts saying, basically, do you remember the lands where you're born? And the elf's like, yeah, Bellerand, right? And again, before it sank into the sea, right? This is middle of before it sank. And he's like, oh, the beautiful river by blah, blah. And he's like, recites some things, and he's like, how do you know that, right? Like, who are you? You know what I mean? Because he can see he has elf ears. He doesn't tell him, and he just tells him, I will release you, but you need to bring a message to the people in the tower. Because remember, the people evacuated the tower, right? So, basically, he sends the people up to the, he sends him away, basically, and lets him go free. And why do the orcs call you father? He doesn't really tell him anything, which kind of fits. Why would Sauron just blab all of his stuff to this random prisoner, right? So he just kind of, I think Sauron's just having, if this is Sauron, he's just kind of having fun, right? He's having fun communicating with an elf, right? Because, and he's like, when I was younger, basically, he says something like that, basically implying he's very old. Again, he's not an elf, even though he's got elf ears and stuff, if it is Sauron. Or maybe it's a made-up character. That is possible, but the air around him and the way the character acted, again, it's almost too formal, but I think they want people to think, who is this character? And then, boom, it's Sauron. Right? We're going to be like, what? You know what I mean? Of course, I think it's pretty obvious because he just has an air. And basically, he sends a message, and we'll get into the message in a minute, what he says. But he says, I have a message I want you to send them. And they have a very rather intense conversation, but it's not really that crazy. And then we flip to the tower. All right, and the people are coming in the tower. Kind of a Helm's Deep kind of feel situation, which is good. Again, this episode felt a lot more like Lord of the Rings to me, like the storytelling and the way they told the story and the way they flipped through scenes and the pacing of the story. It just felt so much better than episode 3. I don't know how it could go from episode 3's pacing, where it wasn't a terrible episode, but there was a lot of stuff I didn't like in episode 3, to an episode where I liked like 85% of it, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff I like in here. So it's much better pacing. Basically, they're like, who made you leader, to her, and basically it's the main 3 characters, right? It's the weird farmer who had the horrible infected cow, sad cow, poor cow, and then the bartender who is of the town, and then her son's like, I can get food and help too, and she's like, you're gonna make it harder for me if you try to go out, right? And he's like, yeah. So basically what happens is, you know, they had a conversation. It's not super important, but basically, don't go out, right, to the town. We'll just hunt around the tower for things. They're not finding any food, right? There's tons of people in this tower. They need food. A very realistic reason. I like, because it's a very realistic reason. They need food to survive. They just all ran to this tower. They're not going to have food for many days if they get into a siege. That's a very realistic thing from a medieval, you know, siege perspective, if the orcs siege it, right? That doesn't happen in episode 4, by the way, just so you know. But it's implied it's going to happen in the next episode. So basically, they go back to the town. They get a bunch of food, and there's no orcs. It's nice and sunny outside, right? Remember, I do like the fact, I'm going to say a lore correct thing on this, that the orcs are so afraid of the sunlight, because that was a huge thing in Lord of the Rings, but we don't really see it, and orcs weren't quite as much realized as a real threat, because everyone that was fighting orcs were like these amazing fighters. Gimli, Legolas, Boromir, you know, Aragorn. These people are like insane fighters. They could each take on 50 orcs by themselves, right? They're insane. So to a normal 2 kids, orcs are very dangerous. 1 orc could get these 2 kids, right? It would be very hard to win unless you did some real smart thing, right? So anyway, they're getting food, and basically goes, I want to check inside the tavern to see if there's food. And the other kid's like, I want to go. I'll wait for you. And he's like, fine, I'll go in. So the main kid character goes in, which, okay, here's a dislike. Because why in the heck would the kid go into one of the houses where it's shaded after he knows from episode 3 that literally the orcs came out of his floor in his house? Why wouldn't there maybe be orcs in the floor of this house? Okay, unrealistic part, something unrealistic, all right? Again, like the one part with realistic of the siege and food, dislike this part where he goes into the house. And his friend's like, why the heck are you going in the house? And his friend's like, okay, I'll wait a minute. And then basically what happens is the cloud, he sees this dead cow. It's like, oh, that's disgusting. And the kid goes in, and basically his friend's outside. He starts getting some grain off the ground. His friend, the clouds go over, and his friend leaves. Like, and again, remember, this kid has pushed his friend into coming, this main character kid. And his friend leaves. And I'm like, good for this guy. Like, yeah, get out of here, bro. What is that kid doing? The clouds are coming over, right? Then an orc comes out, right? And sees him, right? Of course, right? That's going to happen. And it's actually a pretty decent fight. He kind of slashes the kid's leg, and he's like, you know, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, fresh, young blood. Like, oh, I'm going to eat you, kind of thing. So that was good. And then the kid pulls out that thing and stabs his arm with the hilt, and the blood ignites the blade, and the orc's like, where'd you get that, right? What is that? Like, the orc kind of knows what it is for some reason. Obviously, there's got to be some reason behind that for the show. And basically slashes the orc, and he runs out and basically hides in the well, okay? And the orc's gonna go drink water. It's a whole part where they're trying to find him. Search everywhere kind of thing. And basically the orc looks and, I got you in the well, and the kid's underwater, of course, in a second, right? He's holding his breath, which is way too loud when he comes out of the water. So I'm not gonna like or dislike the part though, because it was sort of believable, you know, from a realistic point of view. So but anyway, yeah. So anyway, the kid is now in the well hidden. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Now we hop back, another good pacing of the story. They don't keep on this too long. We hop to the building of the Forge Tower, basically in Eregion, right? I'm gonna say it like they're saying in the movie. I know some people say Eregion, some people say Eregion. It's a hard one. So I'm gonna say it like Celeborn says it here in the show, which is Eregion, right? Eregion. But I know a lot of people have said it's Eregion or whatever with a long I sound for the E. But anyway, let's not go into that anymore. Beautiful shot. Fantastic. Really cool. And basically the dwarves, there's a dwarf down there and an elf, and they're working together to build this tower. Remember, Elrond worked it out. And there's this cool moment. So again, I enjoyed this. This isn't really a lore thing because I don't remember them having to build a tower to make the Rings of Power in the stories, but it does make sense that you'd have to have some kind of amazing forge to make these magical, powerful rings, right? So there is some realism there, right? There's some realism there. And elves and dwarves working together. Remarkable. Elrond's very happy about it. And basically, this whole part, again, this conversation is so good. I'm going to say lower, accurate, and enjoyed. Because basically, Celeborn, excuse me. Did I say Celeborn before? Celebrimbor, okay? Celeborn is Galadriel's husband, who I don't know where he is in this whole season. But Celebrimbor, who is the master elf smith, I said Celeborn a minute ago, I take that back, excuse me. Celebrimbor basically looks at with kind eyes and says, wow, you're a spitting image of your father, basically, right? And Elrond's like, oh, well, that's cool. And basically he talks, and he said, now that I think about it, I forgot about it till just now, he says, right? Great conversation. He goes, your father told me, because he could just see visions, he said, because his father had the ability to kind of see in the future, kind of like Elrond does later, right? And Galadriel does later with her mirror, right? Which is really cool. Yeah, that his son would help me one day with my endeavors or something, he said. He's like, I forgot about it till just now, which was great because, I mean, he's thousands of years old. So things would probably slip your mind after that much time, right? Even with a perfect mind like an elf probably has. So anyway, it's a totally great conversation. You guys, I know a lot of you are watching my reviews to kind of see what happens, but if the next episode is as good as episode 4, you may want to watch the series. But just hold on. Let me keep giving you these reviews. And then the people who are on the fence like that, who aren't sure they want to get Amazon Prime to watch it, can wait and kind of see. I want to be a full judging of all the season once it's out. So anyway, it's a really good conversation. Really well done. And basically, Celebrimbor says, well, I don't want to... And he's like, what's troubling you? He's like, I don't really want to say it because he's your friend. And he's like, what is Durin doing? I think he's hiding something, is basically what Celebrimbor says. And remember, we know that the dwarves are hiding the fact that they found... We think it's a mithril at this point, right? We think at this point. So he goes, and he's like, where is Durin? And she kind of makes up a reason, right? And she kind of knows he knows that she's not really telling the truth, and vice versa, but it's a really good conversation anyway, and it's really well done. So again, enjoyed the part. Very well done. Again, a lot of stuff that was storytelling-wise and script was much better in this episode than the previous episode. So, and it's not just because they're dwarves, mind you. All of it was better, all the different scenes. They're really starting to hook things together with storytelling. So basically, she says some stuff, and he's like, all right, well, I'll go. And it was a nice conversation. It was still very well. Again, like her character. Still a good character. Like, I liked how they portray her and how she's like a good wife, but she can't really spill all her secrets about her husband, who's the king, right? But she's trying to be nice to Elrond because she does like him as a friend, right? So anyway, basically, then we hop and we see a little bit more of Moria of Khazad-dûm, which is fantastic, right? We see some more shots. Now they flip, obviously, a few minutes later to basically talking with Durin and her and Disa are talking, and they're basically, oh, not bad. You what you said to him, right? And she's like, he still seems like he wants to know stuff though, and they do some cute little flirting dwarf thing, which is like, oh, but at the same time, I actually thought it was fine. It was funny. But basically, she's like, we better pipe down or they're gonna hear us. And apparently, he was watching. He shows his lips like, I don't know if he heard it or from far away or if he saw their lips and he kind of read their lips, what they said, which would make sense. So I'm not entirely sure, but he basically hears the old mine and then he thinks, oh, that was under this location, right? That he apparently knows about, which is a little funny that he would know that, but not entirely since he's been Durin's friend and he's probably studied the elves because he's the dwarves because he's a scholar and he knows them better than most elves. So it would make sense he might know where a certain old mine is, a certain term that they use. I forget the exact term. But then he goes up to a wall and he sees footprints coming out of basically a secret door. Which, again, I like this part. I'm going to say I enjoyed this part because I like the fact that he did know they're like secret. Like he looked around the door and he like did a certain amount of tapping, with a certain word and it opened, which is cool because it kind of shows that the dwarves still have a little bit of that magic, even though they're not really super magical as a race, but they do have that ability to make amazing inventions and stuff. I liked that they showed that. It showed that to me. So that's a plus. That's why I liked it. Though basically he gets in here, and this whole part is excellent. He sees the mithril vein, right? He's like, whoa, behind this thing. He's like, that's crazy. And basically he comes in, he's like, why are you in here? You know, Durin, he's basically like, you know, do you even care about our friendship? Are you just here to spy? And he's like, no, I really care. And basically he's like, I'll tell you, but you have to swear not to tell anyone. And basically Elrond swears he won't tell anyone, right? And then basically they have this really, really excellent conversation between both of them as friends, and basically he tells him about mithril, right? The mithril they found, right? So they start talking about the mithril, and basically he shows Elrond the piece they have, right? Here's the piece. Let's see if we can get it. There it is. Of course, it's focused on him and not the mithril. Of course. It's hard to find the exact spot for you. And he even hands it to Elrond, and Elrond goes to hand it back, and he promised he wouldn't tell anyone. And Durin literally says, keep it as a token of our friendship, right? It's like, whoa, that's really cool. So again, another like, because that whole part was awesome. So basically what happens right then, a cave-in happens. And one of the reasons why they're not mining it more is the fact that apparently it's very dangerous. He tells Elrond that it's very unstable, basically a mine, and the cave collapses in behind him. And they're like, oh no, and he's like, 4 of my dwarves were in there, right? Mining. So like, no, that's terrible, right? So then what happens is, we're going to come back to that storytelling, but basically it's we'll keep it there, okay? So now we hop to this next part, which is also really well done. And basically, yeah, here's where he's like, Durin, no! He tells, Elrond tells him, don't run in there. And he's like, I've got dwarves in there, like he's going to help his people, right? Which is a very realistic thing. So really enjoyed that fact. So that was really well done. And then we pop to it clips from that, and we go to another scene here. A beautiful shots of Numenor again, just lore accurate. Numenor looks fantastic. It gets another lore accurate point because it just looks amazing. Okay. And they have a cute little conversation, and basically she says, I don't want to go with strangers. And he's like, oh, if I see any strangers, I'll let you know, right? He's basically asking her out for dinner. So that whole part was cute. So I enjoyed that part. So again, I like those two characters. I think they're doing good. And then we flash back to basically this part, and there's a very, very excellent conversation, okay, by Halbrand, the character, made-up character, and Galadriel, and they're both in the thing. And again, like the conversation, this is where Galadriel start writing her. She's, again, credit to her as an actress, she starts changing very quickly with what they want her to do, right? Basically, he tells her, you're just running head on into everything, which again, it's a lore inaccurate. So there's the lore inaccurate. I know I've given the points for that before already, but again, they're still doing it with her, right? But then she does start turning around and going, oh, and he's like, just listen for a second. He's like, find the exact reason why she locked you up. What was the reason? Was it what you said here or here? And basically, they get down to the point where she talked about, Galadriel mentioned the Queen Regent's father. That's when she got upset. So something's going on there, okay? So that's what basically this whole part is about. And basically Galadriel starts thinking a little more, and then they have a whole conversation that's actually really, really well. I'm going to say I enjoyed it. It was a really good conversation. It was actually good story writing compared to a lot of the other conversations in the last few episodes. So that's a bonus, okay? So anyway, we'll keep going through. Again, as you can see already from the scores, this episode was way better for me. Now, if I was being really mean, I could probably find a couple more things I disliked here and there, and a couple, maybe one or two, because there's lore inaccuracies occasionally here and there, but I'll try to point out the big ones that I remember when I was going through this and watching it today. I did this review literally like 20 minutes after I watched it the first time because I enjoyed it so much. I had to give you the review when it was fresh in my mind for you. So anyway, the Queen Regent Alpharason comes down with some really awesome guards, which, mind you, love their armor. So I'm going to say like their armor. They look epic. And basically, they're armed guards, and they're going to take her to a boat, and they're going to send her back to Middle-earth, to the elves. That's what they want to do, right? That's what the queen has decided, right? So they're going to, so they come down to get her, and basically, of course, do you think she's really going to go? Okay, so here's a bit of a thing. This isn't against Galadriel's character. This is the writing and the combat that I'm going to dislike, okay? So dislike, and it gets 2 dislikes because there's 2 reasons. One, it doesn't really make sense what happens here in 2 ways. So he pulls a sword out because she grabs one of them and flips him around, and she basically somehow, within a flash of like 3 seconds, gets all 4 of these huge armored guards, which, by the way, elves are a little bit stronger than humans, yes, but not by that much. She gets all these guys into the cage, and the thing, and closes it. And it's like, it all happened in like a flash, and it's like, how did you manage to get 4 guys around you all into the thing, right? So from a story perspective, my sister even said this, it's a little bit like a child story, like, oh, that happened, they got pushed into their own trap kind of thing. That part was a little dislike. And then the fact that it just double disliked because it was so bad. But I do like the part where he's like, I wouldn't do that. Like, he's trying to take out a sword. He's like, I don't want to let her get away. And he's like, I wouldn't fight her. So Alfarason doesn't, because he's not much of a fighter. He's a politician, right? He kind of just stands back, and she runs out of the place. And of course, why didn't he immediately go unlock the thing? Why didn't they show him like unlocking it or something? Of course, granted, I guess it's implied that they would unlock it. So, all right, I'm just gonna leave 1 dislike because I think it's unfair to do double dislike there. But from a lore, I'm gonna give it a lore inaccuracy, okay, for that, because as much as she would be a very good fighter and stuff, and she is an elf, and she probably has a little bit more strength than her actual size would suggest, it just too unrealistic for me, that part. But again, it's a minor side note really in the whole episode, because there's lots of other parts that are good. Basically, guards come in and she goes, what happened? And basically the sister and Sealdor have a talk, and basically he said, I got my friends kicked out of the thing and myself. I was hoping just to get myself kicked out. I got my friends, ruined their lives too. Great conversation, very nice. Again, enjoyed. It was another good conversation builder. And basically then they run out. The elf has escaped, right? Awesome, by the way. Awesome. Look at this banner behind him. Look at how cool that is. I'm going to say lore accurate just for the fact that, like, look at these awesome depictions. It's like elves and Numenorians fighting together. Again, this is probably in their area of the city that's more loyal to the elves, right? So it's very well done there. So we'll keep going through here. All right, keep going through. So then the elf, she's gone, right? Search the alleys. The guards are like yelling things in the background. So they're looking around, and then they show the shot of the tower, right? And if you can see, Galadriel's right up there on it. Now, I do not put past the fact that Galadriel, as an elf, could scale that tower, okay? That is not, in my mind, unrealistic, like the other thing was with her throwing all those guys in the dungeon instantaneously. Again, I would have rathered that fight with the guards where she, like, hit one against the wall, boom, hit his head, and he knocks him out, grabs one, throws one in the thing, boom, boom, punches the other guy, does some kind of elven, martial arts that she knows, that kind of thing. That would have been more realistic to me in that other scene than that. But this is fine. I actually am okay with this because elves are very nimble and I'm sure can climb and scale things. Maybe she came out a door or window and came up onto the window. But anyway, she gets to the tower where she thinks the old king is. All right. Here's where things get good. This is where things start turning with Galadriel as a character that I've really been hard on this entire. I've been hard on this character. Again, not the actress. She's fine. It's the story writers, how they want her to be acted, because they literally explained in things how they basically showed they wanted Galadriel to act, right, in things they've written and stuff in comments. She gets in here, and this part is just fantastic. Basically, the queen's there, and she's like, how'd you know I'd be here, right? And they have a whole great conversation, and basically Galadriel, her total countenance changes, right? She sees and this is where they show the immortality of men, right? The mortalness of men and the immortality of elves, right? She realizes, oh, that's why she hasn't shown her father. Her father's like barely alive, and it's really sweet. And he like starts calling out for her like in his sleep, and it's like it's kind of sad. But again, I'm gonna say I enjoyed this part because it was really well done. Suddenly, and lore accurate point. Okay, guys, ready? Boom, lore accurate point for the fact that Galadriel starts acting like the Galadriel I know. She starts acting peaceful and kind and just like really sincere and talking, and she's like, be truth, say the truth to me. What is the real reason? Blah blah. And they have a whole conversation, and then because of this whole conversation, and her face is starting to look more regal, less of the all the time, more of the regal elf look. You don't really fully know her emotions, like what most elves usually portray. But again, that doesn't always necessarily mean that is a, adaptation of knowing an elf's emotions, right? Being more blank. That's not always the case in all literature and all of Tolkien's lore. Some elves do have a little bit more, emotional showing stuff. So that's a side note. So that's not really a bad or a good thing, right? So anyway, so it's actually Muriel. Why did something else said it spelled it different online? It's Muriel, right? So she's the Queen Regent. She's the Queen Regent because her father is dying. Basically, that's why she's in charge, and it's really sweet. And look at Galadriel's face here. She realizes, she realizes the mortality of humans, right? They show it really well here, which is like, how are they going to show that in this series? They show it really well here. So again, lore correct for the fact, and I enjoyed for the fact that they're showing that there's a difference between elves and men with mortality. All right. With living long, and how she's really upset about it, and she kind of breaks her barrier towards Galadriel once Galadriel actually apologizes, by the way, which she shouldn't have done all that stuff earlier anyway, but she apologizes, so that's good. That was good. She apologizes here and then starts acting like the Galadriel I know from my readings, right, of the character. So they walk up to the very top of the tower, and they go to this fantastic room, and we see a glimpse of something, you guys. See this right here? See this sword? Okay. Do you see the top of that sword? They must have got the rights, because that's the top of that sword is Narsil. I don't know for sure, but that sword over there, I'm pretty sure is Narsil. So lore point, okay? So I'm pretty sure that's Narsil right there. That would be pretty cool. Not 100% sure, but I bet it is, okay? So yeah, again, if I showed you the top of my actual replica for United Cutlery, it looks almost identical to the top part where the gold is. It's kind of hard to see. For some reason, it's really dark on mine, but there's gold inlaid here with the words. So I think that might be Narsil. That's just a guess. Maybe not. Maybe it's just a sword that looks similar because it was made by Numenorians. But I think that it might be. So that's a cool thing. Then again, look at her face here. She looks more like the regal, calm face, and it's not a face of teenager frustration or anger or all these other faces she was making. Now she's making a more face of what I think of when she's really listening and communicating, right? So anyway, she flipped. She really flipped quite a bit, the personality thing. Let's hope she stays more like this Galadriel, a little bit more regal, maybe still a leader kind of character, but you know what I mean, more into what we see in other adaptations or what I read, what my feelings at least are in the book. Again, some people have told me they've really liked the version of her being more spunky elf teenager. That's totally fine. I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. Personally, for me though, I just didn't feel like it fit the character, considering she's not young. She's already super old at this point. It's not like again, I did this description explanation before. It's not like a 15-year-old to a 60-year-old, right, in time frame. This is like a 60-year-old to a 62-year-old, comparing from this time to when she is in the Lord of the Rings adaptations. So I know that in our minds that the actresses are different with Cate Blanchett and this actress, right? But it just seems weird that you'd have that much change in only 2 years. I mean, there is a chance people do change in short periods of time for certain reasons, but a miraculous miracle change kind of thing. But let's just keep going. So anyway, this part's really well done. Beautiful, fantastic shot of this room. It's got axes on the walls back over there, so I really enjoyed this part. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Wrong button. And then all this stuff, and then in the middle of the room, as you can see right here, there's a thing, right? And they take it up, and this is a palantir, right? And they say it right, the palantir, not a palanthea, but a palantir or whatever. I used to say it wrong a long time ago when I was younger. This is why I say that. So she says it correctly, and she's like, all the other seeing stones have been lost. And they call them seeing stones. So lore correct, right? Lore correct. They would have one in Numenor that were given by the Valar, so all correct, right? And they basically says, touch it. She's like, I warn you. It's basically, this one's different than others. Because she said, I've used them before, right? She's used one of the other ones in the lot, which would make sense, again. But she's like, warn you. And then there's a really cool effect of basically the ice effect we saw in the trailer. like does the room and basically brings her into the same vision that the queen saw in her dream. There's the cool effect. Very interesting effect of visually. It's not physically doing that. It's obviously an effect of it's her mind being brought into something. Now, again, there is a problem here. There's a big lore problem. They do say the fact that basically this thing is showing the future. I don't remember anywhere in the lore where it could show the future, okay? Because the Palantir were designed for seeing for far distances to another Palantir or communicating with someone, right? Which is what Sauron uses in his tower. Maybe he uses this one. I don't know in the future. But that's why Peter Jackson's adaptation, which is actually incorrect that there's a fiery eye, because he was never a fiery eye, even though Tolkien does draw an eye, but it's more of a symbolic eye watching over people because he's using a Palantir to look for the ring, right? But again, it's really good in Peter Jackson's. We all love the eye, the fiery eye. We think that's so cool. Again, there's sometimes good changes to stories that are well implemented that fit the lore respectfully to Tolkien, right? So anyway, it's really cool how it explodes, and she basically sees the same image as the very beginning, with basically Numenor being crushed, and she like pulls her hand away, and she's like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. She's like, this is the future that I saw, right? She's like, and they have a really good conversation. So I'm going to say I love this conversation. Really well done. Now these two characters are very respectful to each other. It's a total dime flip from the previous episode. But very, very nice. This whole conversation is very good. Again, it's a lore inaccurate, though, because Palantirs can't do that. What people who could see the future were the Mirror of Galadriel. She could use that because she was in her Forest of Lothlorien. She was powerful. She was one of the Eldar. She has the Ring of Power at that point. That's why she's able to glimpse the future, right? Some of the elves have that ability, right? Elrond has that ability, right? Galadriel has that ability later. They show that in Peter Jackson's adaptation a tiny bit. But again, they're visions that don't always come true, right? Which Galadriel says in The Lord of the Rings to Frodo, right? With the Shire burning. Now, again, that's changed because originally the Shire does burn, right? In Lord of the Rings. But it was a nice change because who wants to see the Shire at the end of the story all destroyed? They had to do a whole other movie to deal with the whole Shire, scourging the Shire, even though it gets beautiful again, right? Side note. But the fact that they use that it has the ability to that's why one dislike for lore there. So I don't know if I already did it. I don't think I did it. So a dislike for the lore there. But I do like the scene. I do like it, and I do understand why they're using the Palantir in this way. It helps for storytelling. Okay, so it's all right. I don't think it's not game changing story wise. It was very interesting. It helped us as viewers to kind of understand why the queen is worried and stuff, and she thinks it's because the elf is here. That's why. And again, they have a really good conversation, and basically Muriel wants to help Galadriel at this point after this conversation, but she says, I can't because my kingdom, right? I can't do my hope on this thing for my whole kingdom, which I love. Okay, she makes a decision based on the fact that she thinks it's better for her kingdom than for her own hope that Galadriel is right? So that made sense. But now we're gonna move through this a little bit faster here. Really great conversation. This is look at Galadriel's face. So much better. She has respect the way she's staring, and it's more regal. It's just so much better. Again, good actress that she's totally flipped on a dime for their storytelling. And again, apparently it's because, she admitted, she said sorry, right, to the Muriel. She also had Halbrand had that conversation with her, and she also had the conversation with Elendil, right? Elendil, excuse me, Elendil, that's the other one. That's the one I was getting mixed up with. It's Elendil. Okay, what we got? I'm gonna freak myself out now. Just make sure I do that. So anyway, now they're basically like, oh, look at all this food. We flip back to the tower where the people are. Again, kind of that Helm's Deep feel of refugees kind of thing. So that's why I kind of liked it. It had a similar vibe to the Lord of the Rings, Two Towers. Not quite as epic, but still good. He comes in with food. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, you brought a cart of food. Where's my son? And he basically says, oh, he said he'd be right behind me, right? And of course, he's in the well. And then the kid tries to sneak out. And actually, my sister made a comment. It's kind of like a video game, this whole part. I didn't like or dislike it. It was fine. But basically, they're like, he's hiding behind things and moving around. It's kind of like trying to get through. And then he stops at a side of a wall and he smiles thinking he got away. And of course, at that point, a little bit of a dislike because it's like, of course, he's going to get caught right there, right? And basically what happens is, an orc slams him down on the ground. It's like, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to cut off your arm. And then right when he thinks he's going to get killed, he goes, And then he's like, looks up, and it's not his blood. It's the orc's blood, and the elf hero is here, right? Which, again, I like his character. And I like the whole part. So I'm going to say I like that part because I like his reaction. He thinks he's going to get his arm cut off and finds out the orc is dead. And so now basically they're running. There's arrows shooting through. By the way, this is where that slow-mo part comes from the trailer where he grabs the arrow to basically save the kid and shoot it back. This part was well done. I thought they were going to kill the kid or they were going to kill his mom shows up and basically grabs the kid and helps him because his leg was cut, by the way, in the previous scene. Well, he's protecting them. So I actually liked this part. I thought she was going to die. I was like, that would work. That would probably work for the story, but that'd be really sad. But she doesn't die. They get out and basically the sun's coming up and they know it. Just happens to be coming up at that moment, which is a little bit of a... But I do like the fact, again, that they're showing that the orcs will not chase in the sunlight. So, okay? Lore-like, because that's big for me. Now, granted, the sun comes up and they're like, they're all mad. They want to get them from the trees. They're like, oh, the sun, right? And basically, I'm like, why aren't they shooting arrows? Then they start shooting arrows, right? They start shooting. I'm like, oh, okay, they are shooting arrows, right? So they're running, right? And they're shooting arrows. And they're like, screaming echoes. The orcs are very angry that they can't chase them. Realistic, good. I'm glad the arrows were shot. They do shoot like stormtroopers from Star Wars. They can't hit a target for the life of them, so the arrows fly all over. My friend Jethros said, well, maybe it's because the sun's in their eyes. I'm like, that could be it, because they can't see good in the light. That could be a good reason. And then we get a beautiful shot of a mountain range. Oh, gorgeous, right? Gorgeous mountain range here. And then we go back to another scene here, and we get to the scene we saw from the trailer as well with her singing, okay? I'm going to put a like, you guys. I like this part. The song was actually very interesting. It was very mysterious, very epic. It actually was nice to listen to. I wasn't sure at first, but Elrond's watching and he's in kind of amazement that they're having this like almost like a ritual, right? And she tells Elrond what it is at the end. Really good conversation. She basically says, we're asking the mountain to release our friends that have been caught in the rumble alive, those 4 miners, right? And it's like, oh wow, okay. And they're upset and worried about it, and then a little bit of shaking, right? And basically they had a really good conversation. Again, another like. This conversation was really excellent between their characters. And then Durin comes in, right? And he goes, and we're really worried about it, right? And they immediately relieve us with storytelling, which I love. He goes, we got the last one out alive. So they got all 4 of the Dwarven Miners out alive. So he's really happy about that. But he looks really grumpy. And basically he says, your father must be relieved, she said. And basically he said, yeah, he shut the whole mine down. So basically his father, right, the older Durin, again, there shouldn't be 2 Durins at once, but we've already gotten a dislike for that with lore. But basically he's like, my father decided to shut the whole mine down, which he's upset about because he wants to get more mithril. He wants to do it safely, obviously, but he wants to get more mithril. So he's really upset, and he's really grumpy, being a very grumpy dwarf. Very well done. He's really upset about it. And he says a bunch of stuff. He's like, "Urgh!" And basically, Elrond then comes up to him. Very, very Elrond. I'm going to say lore correct and like, because this is so Elrond. He comes up to him, and he basically tells him the story of his father, right? So, and how his father became the star, right? And tells him the whole story of his father, how he did all these great deeds and stuff. And he goes, and I wonder if my father would be proud of what I've done. Elrond basically says. And he says, I wonder if my father would be upset with and disappointed at how little I've done. Like, basically. And then he looks at Durin and basically says to Durin, really, really good. This whole part is just like, it's really epic. And he basically says, at least you can still talk to your father. Don't let that, basically gives him that speech, right? And it's really well done worded, though. It's really well done. It's not too generic like it should, like you'd think. And then his face, he like has a realization as he's telling the story and then says that. And then, of course, he looks at him really, they both look at each other like true friends. It's rather touching. It's rather well done. And basically, he looks at him and he's like, basically, yeah, you're right. Like, he's still upset. And he's like, yeah, you're right, basically is what he says. And it's just really, it's rather touching. It's rather good. And then Disa kind of comes over and gives him a hug. You know what I mean? So, and then she goes, I'd really like to hear the story of how you two originally met, right? And he's like, well, you see it. He says it. She goes, I know you. How did Elrond remember it? And Elrond basically would leave the room, and Elrond's saying, well, actually, there wasn't 2 trolls that he saved me from. There were 3 trolls, and I saved him. And he was screaming like a small child. He's like, I was not. Like, it goes into a comical relief, but it's really well done, really well placed. It's not stupid. I really enjoyed it. So again, another part I enjoyed. So a lot of stuff I enjoyed in this episode. Then he goes to his father, breathing heavily, and he says, I apologize, father, right? To his older dad. And his dad, really, again, great lines, basically says all the stuff that they believe, not lore accurate, that, when you become king, all of your ancestors remember that's not quite. They're changing it from the Durin's line of the Durin reincarnation to kind of more of a, you as the king, you get all the memories of our forefathers kind of thing. Again, not unbelievable for dwarves. I'm not going to like or dislike it from a lore perspective. It's fine. I understand I'm giving them a lot of leeway for adaptation. But basically, that's what he says. He gets up and he tells his son, I will basically always love you, no matter what, even in anger, and there's nothing to be forgiven, right? Like, he don't need to say sorry, basically. And it's really touching. And then they go straight into a conversation where he says, Elrond asked me to come to Lindon. And the dad basically says, well, what's your gut feeling? Like, should you go to Lindon? Like, do you fully trust everything? He's like, well, I trust Elrond, kind of basically is the gist. He's like, but what does your intuition say? Are the elves hiding something, you think? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, good, go to Lindon. Basically is what the dad says. Not in a super subversive way. It's more of a way of like, let's double check, make sure the elves are telling us the truth, because they're pretty sure Elrond is, but you know what I'm saying. So again, a little bit of distrust between the dwarves and elves. I liked it. I liked the whole conversation. It was really well done. I think that's actually quite lore accurate because there is a lot of distrust. I'm going to say a lore point for that too, because this conversation is really well done. Very well done. And then we get back to the end here where basically they have a good conversation. He delivers the message. It's basically saying that, again, I like this part. Again, I like the fact he's acting that, like, she almost looks like she wants him to, like, give her a hug or kiss her or something. And he doesn't. He's very, very elven with his, like, no, I'm just going to stand here. But he basically says that this person said that they will not kill us all if we submit to their rule, basically. Which very much sounds like Sauron. Because Sauron doesn't give a crap to kill everyone and treat everyone wrong. But if you submit to him and serve him, you can live in a very horrible situation by a dictator, tyrant, Sauron, right? So again, I think that's why that character is Sauron. Again, like this part, really well done. They have more conversations, okay? And then we see the kid. He basically has a conversation with the old guy from the tavern, and he's the one that he stole the sword from in his basement, by the way. So he's like, you've heard of Sauron, right? He has a very feel of like those people in Bree where they were really like kind of creepy looking like tavern people. And he's like, Sauron, our master will return kind of thing. You're like, oh, wow, this guy's kind of a part of a cult kind of thing for Sauron. And he's got a stab at his arm. And then he basically looks at the kid's arm. And the kid stabbed his arm with the blade to get blood into it so it would turn into a blade to fight that orc. So he has a wound too. So now this guy knows he's using his sword or whatever. So, and does the sword have more significance? It's nothing to do with lore. Again, this whole conversation I liked. It was, again, very well. This is good. It was much better storytelling where you're like, ooh, I want to hear more about this sideline of the story, right? Have you heard of Sauron? He's got he's got a good voice. So anyway, good conversation. And then we see a shot of that character again, who I believe is Sauron, not in his fair form yet. He looks like an elf, but he's still all gross and decrepit, which makes it really scary. He's a bad guy. And then they're probably gonna, I think they'll show him later that he'll morph into a very fair form, because I can see into this character would look very fair if they read his makeup and stuff. So yeah, I think that he looks pretty good so far. If this is Sauron, it looks pretty good. I'm not going to say lore accurate or disaccurate, but I'm going to say I like, because I like the way he looks. And basically this orc says, we found the sword or whatever. It's in the tower, where the people are hiding, where he knows he sent the elf to go tell him the message that was a captive, right? So anyway, that's what we know for next episode. Then we get this thing where she's basically escorting, because remember she told Galadriel, no, I'm not going to be able to work with you. I'm going to escort you back to Numenor. I mean, not Numenor, excuse me, to Middle-earth from Numenor with a boat. So they're basically leaving, and Alfarazan basically says, good, we'll tell the people, that kind of stuff. And he says some goodbye, be it to peace or what, or, a nice greeting, he said, in Elvish to her real quietly, where only she could hear it. And she, kind of respects that, right? And she's just respectful in leaving, More like the Galadriel, I would have thought. Again, they have a boat take out to the dock, so again, this is something I like. It's very realistic to me. The boat, again, there was a whole lot of stuff I liked in this, guys, and a lot less that I disliked. Now, if I was being picky, I could find a few more things I disliked in this, but again, I'm giving them a lot of leeway. So just so you guys realize, I'm not just like, oh, no, I support it completely. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this particular episode was much better than the previous. Now, granted, my standard might not be quite as high as I would personally like. Like, for example, I wasn't going into Rings of Power thinking it was going to be at the same level as Peter Jackson's adaptations. I just wasn't, right? A lot of people weren't, right? A lot of us weren't, which is kind of a shame that we have to go in like that. But this is a much better episode. And again, look at that scenery back there. Oh, looks so good. So basically, she looks kindly. She gets on the boat. Again, she's leaving. Farason says, oh, we need to go tell the court. She's like, well, let's not keep them waiting, right? That we escorted the elf off the island. And basically, then there's this moment where the leaves blow, and the prophecy that she said in the previous episode 3, which kind of didn't make sense to us, now makes a lot more sense, that the leaves are kind of tears of the Valar. A reminder of the tears that they're doing something wrong, right? So basically, she feels that, and she kind of hears that, and then she sees the tree again. The tree is so lore accurate. Oh man, the tree looks great. Anyway, so then basically, she's like, oh no, right? This is the shot. That's the shot we saw in the trailer originally. So again, we saw stuff from the trailers all the way from episode 4, which we've seen a lot now. So I don't know if 5 will have as much, but we'll see. And then you see this shot. She looks back down. Alfarazon stops, like, why are you stopping? And he realizes something, too. He gets a sense of something, too. And he kind of looks at her like, great shot. Dude, Elendil is such a great character. Like, I love the actor so far in the character, and super great. And yes, he was never the king of Numenor, by the way, like I mentioned last episode, that I realized he wasn't. He's a lord. He always was of the certain group of people. But again, we'll see how they work that into the original lore, right? But anyway, then they have this conversation, and then basically she realizes that, like, they're upset that they're having her leave. Again, look at that shot of the docks, and there's like a water wheel back there, and oh my gosh, I can't put my mouse up or it blocks things. Really cool, really well done. That is just such a cool shot. It's amazing. So anyway, then, but the very tears then she says something, and he realizes that she realizes something. So he respects it, which is rather cool. We see a beautiful shot, and there's the awesome. Now, does that remind you of Minas Tirith, or does that remind you of Minas Tirith? Not exactly, but it makes me think Minas Tirith, which again, lore accurate and because that is epic, you guys. That is such a cool shot right there. That is so cool. I love it. Visually amazing. And then those are the petals coming down from the white tree, which you can see way up there at the top. Basically kind of warning her. And then her father basically kind of moves in his bed, like he sensed something, because her father was very loyal to the elves and the Valar, right? Who's like basically bedridden, right? But she basically says, we need to have bravery and stand with the elves, and we'll send an armada, or like to help the Southerners, basically is how they're doing it. It's like, okay, well, originally they did send stuff, right? A little bit different. So I'm going to have to say a little bit of a lore inaccuracy there, but I do like the part. Okay, so I like the part for their change, for their adaptation. Inaccurate with lore, because I don't think she's originally the one that sent the people there, but that's okay, because they're having to rechange things a little bit to their liking. And again, her father kind of in his bed, but again, you kind of feel bad for him, because he seems like a nice old man, you know what I mean? And he's like having troubles. Like my heart reaches out to someone who's having troubles, like that. So but then he kind of wakes up, so maybe he's seeing that too, that maybe they're doing the right thing, right? But then we get this really awesome shot of Numenor again. Fantastic shot of Numenor with Halbrand basically being let out of prison. I don't know why he's let out. Apparently he did something right. But look at that great shot of it. It's so cool, you guys. It's so cool. Yeah, so anyway, she basically says to Grease that we're going to do that. Alfarazon goes along with it. He says, our ships will depart in 10 days, right? It's like, okay. So I'm not sure how they're going to turn him into the person who gets corrupted by Sauron later, but maybe Sauron corrupts him once they get there, right? When maybe they'll capture Sauron, just like in the books, even though technically different, believe, king that captured Sauron, but they've already merged the time merging. Again, I think it will be okay, depending on how they write it, because there is a huge compression of time happening here. It is kind of a bummer for us because we wanted to see more but I'm gonna do a dislike for the time compression, but I understand, right? Like what they're doing with it from a perspective. She comes out and they're like, okay, well the elf is now basically, and then Elendil here basically says, we need ready men to come on the boat. And then basically the first person that says they will go are the two boys that got kicked off by his friends by Isildur. So he says he'll go, and then his friend's like, I'll go too. And then Isildur says, I will go and protect the queen as well, right? Because she's got the queen regent's going to go too. So then he's like, oh, my son's going to go. And then when those three do, then everybody says they'll join in and help. So basically we're seeing a unification there, but probably there's going to start being a break apart too soon between the peoples, because they've already kind of shown the little bit of between the people who still respect the elves and the Valor and the people who don't like the elves. They've already kind of shown that split well in this episode, so we'll see how that comes up around and about. But that was pretty well done. Again, his two friends, these are his two friends. They say they will go. It's pretty cool. She's like, oh my gosh, they're leaving? No, the sister. So basically they finish up with that, and then that's the end of the episode. But now we have this huge thing that they're gonna leave, right? And she's kind of scary looking right there, Galadriel. But it was just really, really well done. Way more, you guys. There's a couple lore inaccuracies, of course, that were kind of bad, but they weren't tremendous in this episode. And the storytelling was so much better. I mean, look at that. I almost gave it 40 likes, right, of things I enjoyed in this episode, and 15 things that I felt were very lore accurate and correct. Again, there's some dislikes there and stuff, but compared to my other ones, that's a much better score for this episode. And again, you guys, I do not have full support. Like, I do not endorse these shows yet until I've watched the whole season, and that'll give you my overall rating. But this episode, for me, compared to the other ones, which I gave on my lower end like a 7 or 6 point. So episode 3 was like a 6.5 or 6 out of 10 for me, which is kind of generous, I guess, all things considered, maybe a 5. Where the first two, the second one was a lot better than the first one, I thought, where I gave the first one like a 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, and I gave the 8.5 combined for 2 and 1 together, where definitely the second one was like an 8 out of 10 for me, 8.5. This one was definitely an 8.5 or 9 out of 10 for me, like as a show within itself. Now, if I was going to be super, super picky, I might bring that down a little bit, just from a fact, but this one felt the storytelling was better. There was some good music, by the way. That one part where Galadriel is leaving on the boat right there at the end, there's this epic like singer that comes on that's kind of like almost maybe not quite as good as the music with like Arwen in the Lord of the Rings, that beautiful angel sounding music, but it's this really beautiful singer that basically that prophecy when the petals come down, really, really well done. Again, there's been really lacking on music the last few episodes that I was really disappointed, but this episode brought out a lot more music that I'm like, oh, that I heard the music, like I heard it, right? Because you want music that you remember. You don't want just background music that's like, you know, oh, it's there. You know, it's there to kind of sort of give a mood. You want music that, like, gives the mood and then you remember the theme song. You know, like, dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun, right? Like from the Lord of the Rings or all the different ones, right? Yeah, you know what I'm saying. All right, my friends. Well, you guys have a wonderful day in Middle-earth. Thank you for watching. We kept that under an hour and 10 minutes. Thank you to my Patreons for your support. It means a lot. Again, we got tons of Lord of the Rings online content coming out. And again, I know I'm covering the stuff with Rings of Power. I wasn't even sure I was originally going to cover it, but I think that a lot of you wanted to hear my views on it. So there's my view, my honest review and breakdown of the episode at 4. Subscribe when Zerva earned it. Next episode's up there for this playlist. And over there, on top of that, will be my Lotro Tale, my voiceovers in Lord of the Rings Online, which we have a lot of coming out soon. So you guys have a great day in Middle-earth, my friends, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Voice of the Rings. Stay happy out there. Baruch Kazad, Kuzad, I menu.